We're going to be talking about an interesting discovery on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. We're going to be talking about intersex marine mammals. That's right. We're going to be talking about marine mammals that have the XXY chromosome because there was a new discovery that came out in a paper where a marine biologist did a genetic test and found that a southern right whale that was sampled back in 1989 has XXY chromosomes. This is very rare in marine mammals. It's something that we have to talk about, and we're going to talk about it today. So let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin, and this is the podcast where you find out what's happening with the ocean, how you can speak up for the ocean, what you can do to live for a better ocean by taking action. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about all things marine mammals and genetic testing and what in the world is an intersex organism. This is going to be a lot of fun. I know there's a lot of political debates around this and political talk around what is intersex, what's transgender, what is all this stuff around, different types of genders and stuff. This is not the case. It's not one of those topics. We are going to be talking about intersex. This is not the same as transgender. This is not the same as anything that we're just talking about genetic material that has XXY chromosomes. Normally, double X chromosome is a female, XY chromosome is a male. So we're talking about animals that have the genetic material of XXY, as well as some have noticeably seen having different, both reproductive organs present at the time of death when they're actually in necropsies, because that's when we actually see what is happening. So we're going to talk about that today. Like I said, this is not a political thing. This is just what we discovered in science. I want to get that right off clear because I know people in the comments are going to be like, you're just pushing an agenda. This has nothing to do with any political agenda. This is science. This is what's been discovered. And what I think is something that's pretty cool to help us understand these animals. We're going to just talk about, how this all came to be. So in 1989, researchers collected skin samples from southern right whales off the Argentina's Valdez Peninsula to study the species' genetic diversity. So they're just looking at genetic diversity. Decades later, in 2022, Carla Crossman, a graduate student from St. Mary's University in Halifax, Nova Scotia, go Canada, analyzed these samples and encountered an anomaly with one whale labeled EAU-10B. This initial chromosome analysis suggested that EAU-10B was female, possessing two X chromosomes, which is typical of females. However, further testing revealed the presence of the SRY gene, typically found in the Y chromosome and associated with male development. So doing even more further testing and figuring out that there is a Y chromosome, they just found out this individual has a chromosome configuration of XXY, identifying it as the first documented intersex southern right whale. This is pretty cool, and it's very rare to find these types of intersex individuals in marine mammals because we don't really get to see and get a lot of genetic testing in marine mammals. Although further research has discovered that we can take more tissue samples and stuff, but it's very difficult to work with marine mammals for obvious reasons. They're not a lot in captivity. A lot of them are in the wild. It's very difficult to get samples in general. We are just discovering patterns of the species and really getting to know those species. So more genetic testing, I'm sure, will reveal this if it's tested. The one thing in this study, which was found in Nautilus magazine, by the way, I'll put the link in the show notes. It was interesting to see that a lot of animals are tested for, say, the double X chromosome if they think that they're a female or a male. And then once you know that there's two X chromosomes, you don't do any further testing. It wasn't until Carla figured, hey, look, there's something here that suggests that this may also be male. And so they did further testing, tested for that Y gene, and found out that it's double XY. That's a really cool thing to do. It doesn't happen often. It just goes to show, I wonder how many individuals that we missed that could have been intersex, but we didn't further test, right? We just tested for one side. We said, oh, it's got an XY chromosome or it's got a double X chromosome. It must be female, it must be male, depending on the chromosome configuration. Really simple stuff. Sometimes it's missed in science because, why bother? You just assume that it's going to happen. This is why we test and this is we continue to test. So kudos to Carla for doing that and really opening the eyes of other scientists to be like, hey, maybe we do see more intersex individuals, but we just don't know. We just don't test for them. So maybe that will be something to test for in the future, as well as the other samples that have been preserved of that population to see if that is something that is normal. Now, these species that are intersex tend not to be reproductive. So some of the reproductive organs that have been seen in the past, like in bottlenose dolphins, they've been seen in porpoises, they've been seen in seals, often have, both reproductive organs, but they're not fully developed. So indicating that they're not reproductive. However, we don't know if they're actually reproductive or not. We just assume based on the development that we see in front of us, that scientists see in front of us. I've never done this type of study before. That's why I'm talking about it, because I think it's kind of cool. But so that's something that we need to find out more about, right? Because intersex species have been around for quite some time. We've seen them in freshwater systems, or actually proliferant in freshwater systems. Studies by the U.S. Geological Survey revealed that the male smallmouth bass in Pennsylvania's Susquehanna, I think it's Susquehanna, maybe? I'm not sure the pronunciation of that, I apologize. In Delaware and Ohio River basins exhibited immature eggs in their testes. This intersex condition is believed to result from exposure to endocrine disrupting chemicals, so things that happen in the environment, such as pesticides and hormones, that enter waterways through agricultural runoff and wastewater discharges. So amphipods and environmental stressors have also been discovered. So in the marine environment, intersex occurrences have been observed in species like the amphipod, the Echinogammarus marinus. Long-term monitoring in Northwest Brittany recorded intersex individuals in frequencies ranging between 0.87% to 12%. Notably, the incidence of intersex increased with distance from the sea, suggesting that environmental factors, including endocrine disrupting compounds and freshwater stressors, may play a role in triggering intersex conditions. So again, being close to humans, not always great for animals, right? So having those endocrine disruptors present can really change somebody and change an animal. We're not just being facetious with that. Now, that's just not me saying that. That's true. This is what the evidence kind of shows. So we know that there are animals that are out there in the marine environment that will change sexes depending on the environment. So some fish, like clownfish, will change their sex if there's no other females around. So a male will turn to a female so that it can reproduce and it can have babies. The survival of the fittest is the genetic material that continues to persist in clownfish that allows them to survive for so long. So if it's just males that are around and there are no females, one male will turn into a female, and then that female will reproduce with all the males, and then, they'll have their babies, their larvae, and it'll grow into lots more clownfish. It's really interesting to hear these different types of evolutionary factors that help, animals survive in the environment, whether it's a freshwater or marine environment. So that's always something that is interesting. Now, there are different ways to detect intersex. So it could be from genetic material, which doesn't always happen, or it could just be from mixed gonadal tissue, such as ovarian and testicular tissue within the actual bodies. The individuals have either underdeveloped or non-functional reproductive organs, which suggests they are unlikely to produce. The EAU-10B, which is the intersex southern right whale that really capped off this story, discovered in 1999. They had the XXY chromosomal setup, but there's no indication that it reproduced, and this chromosomal combination is typically associated with infertility in other mammals, including humans. So this is not just something that happens in southern right whales or in humans. It can actually happen in intersex in fin whales, where it was reported with both testes and uterus, but no functional reproductive output was recorded. In harbor porpoises, as I mentioned earlier, some intersex individuals had both male and female tissue, but again, no evidence supporting that reproduction was found. So it's a hard thing to find out because we don't really see when males and females reproduce on the regular. We do have that video that I talked about a couple months ago where, somebody caught it on photographs, a series of photographs of two humpback whales reproducing, mating off the coast of Maui. And so that was kind of cool to see. But we don't often get that, and a lot of times the intersex conditions are only discovered after death during necropsies. So scientists rarely have a chance to study the behavior or reproduction over time, so it's really difficult to see. But I just thought it was a cool thing to bring to you as a way to understand species, understand what is happening in the oceans, how we are affecting the oceans, and how we're affecting the species that live in it through disrupting endocrine systems that can change the hormonal balance within animals, but also the way they naturally evolve into being able, in some species, being able to change from male to female. And there's also the case of pharmaceuticals, which again, probably endocrine disruptors that get into our river systems just from what we've been ingesting. Right? This is like typical stuff that we ingest, whether it be, pain pills, whether it be reproductive blocking pills or anything like that, that can go through our system and that will actually end up in the river systems, like through our plumbing and in the river systems, that can affect fish. That's why we see a lot of freshwater fish being affected by this either intersex or other type of, I'm going to say, just differences in morphologies. So it's a cool study to look at. It's really great to identify and talk about it. We're only just scratching the surface with this type of stuff, as we normally are when we're discussing discovering something new. But I thought it was really great to bring it to you. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Leave a comment below if you're watching this on YouTube. And if you are listening to this on another platform, please hit me up on Instagram at How to Protect the Ocean. That's at How to Protect the Ocean. I want to thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next, and happy conservation.